We're going to start with Jeff Champtaloup from Brain Cells, and he'll be talking about understanding the consumer, and then we'll be looking at Amazon as an example of a business that's just highly customer-centric. So, introduction to Jeff. He's got 30 years branding and marketing experience. He's the managing director of Brain Cells. He's worked with leading national food and beverage brands, businesses such as British Sausages, Little Creatures, Anchor Foods, and many more. He's so good at marketing that when I asked him to give me some questions around most famous person or worst ever job, he was so good he didn't give me anything. That is how good he is. So welcome to Jeff.
Supposed to be good at off-the-cuff stuff in marketing, but when you get asked 2 minutes before you come up, you just go blank. So maybe I'll remember something during this. Been a really interesting morning for me. We work in a lot of food and beverage. We work with a lot of food and beverage businesses here in Perth, and so coming at it from this angle has been a real eye-opener for me. Lots of data, and very interesting data, especially the historical stuff I find fascinating. We were involved in a pitch for the Potato Marketing Board earlier this year. Not the Potato Marketing Board, the Potato Growers Association, which was the changeover from the Marketing Board, and we didn't win because we had a particularly radical point of view about separating them from processed potato. But it was fascinating understanding, listening to Andrew and understanding how these industries were sort of militaristic in the way that they were set up, and now they're changing and struggling with how to grow and how to develop. Anyway, so what I'm going to talk about today is understanding the consumer. So when I was thinking about this, understanding the consumer means that there's a need for a relationship. If you need to understand somebody else, you want to have a relationship with them. Well, that's inherent in that sort of question. So what I thought, rather than hit you with a whole lot more stats and data, I'm going to come at it from a branding point of view. I'm going to just tell you how we work in the industry and how we boil things down and try and be single-minded, clear, and able to resonate with consumers so as they are persuaded or move into some kind of behavioural shift, whether that be going down to the shop to buy something or whether that is changing their behaviour from an awareness and stopping smoking or whatever it is. So I thought I'd just show you a quick movie clip, which is something that I've always thought is really entertaining, from Seinfeld, the soup Nazi scene. I don't know if any of you remember this scene, but for me there's so many different messages in this because everyone wants to get to a point where their product is so in demand that they can dictate terms and they don't need customers. And then on the other hand, from a customer point of view, it is so ludicrous that you would put up with being treated this way. So I just thought it was a lovely opener for us to just go further.
I'm not letting you cut in line. Why not? Because if he catches us, we'll never be able to get soup again. Okay. Medium turkey chili. Medium crab bisque. Just forget it, let it go.
Okay. So that was one type of relationship, and this is a quote from a very famous marketing advertising guy based in. Well, he started a business called Ogilvy and Mather that is still around today. He was a champion in the 60s, and I always remember hearing this when I was very young, and it stuck with me. It still sticks with me today. This kind of assumption that there may be an assumption that the consumer or the customer is not as clever as we are, and so therefore we've got to make things really simple. Well, this just expels that myth completely. So I think in any kind of relationship, there needs to be an openness and a respect and an empathetic point of view if you want to start any type of dialogue. And from what we've heard this morning, there's a real need for dialogue in this space that we're sort of entering here. There's lots of ideas, there's lots of complexity. The one common theme is that we all need to start to communicate with each other and understand each other's points of view. So this is one of the mantras that we come from, is that the customer is not foolish at all. The customer is actually in a very powerful position and very smart. So today we're in a different space than we were back in Ogilvy's day. We're negotiating major changes in how and why consumers connect with brands, with the whole digital world that we now live in, and with the completely flooded markets of almost every product that you choose to think about. Values are now becoming as important as functional benefits. People used to have this unique selling point of difference, that once you got one of those, your product would go nuts. That's no longer the case, because the product differences are so nanos in size that people are just baffled by the nature of them. So you have to give people more about what it is, what your values are, than just a single point of difference. So a point of view is as important as a point of difference. And building and facilitating communities are as important as broadcasting to mass audiences. And, the decline of press, which used to be a major medium for the whole marketing advertising industry. Television is declining, screens are multiplying. Social media is becoming a very, very important channel to affect change and to create awareness. So that's what we mean by building communities. Meaningful brand actions are paramount to building authentic, genuine relationships with audiences and shareholders. I mean, it is an irony with social media that, there's an argument that it's an incredibly fake point of view, but it also does have an ability to communicate real things that are happening in real time. There's no doubt that that's where it's hugely powerful, like today's event, the hashtagging, etc. It's people expect this from a community now, and they want it in real time. Did that change? No, it's not. So to understand your customer, let's look at them through a brand. So really, in a lot of ways with communication and with personal relationships, you can really only affect your own point of view, your own attitude. You can't really make someone else change fundamentally. I mean, marriage counselling is fundamentally based on that. You can talk to people, you can persuade them, you can educate them, but in the end they make their own decision. So what is a brand? It's not a logo. It's not a simple symbol. It's not an identity, as in a stationery set or a folder or a pull-up banner. and it's not a product. What it is, it's a gut feeling about a product or a service. It's emotional, and it's a feeling that that you either have or you don't have. It's a person's gut feeling because brands are defined by individuals, not companies, markets, or publics. It's a gut feeling because we're emotional, intuitive beings. Okay, so we can pretend that we're strong, rational, logical beings, but in the end, we've got blood running through our systems. We are emotional, and in some ways, that presentation with the horticultural stuff, where these people were charging on with more water and more fertiliser, is because they had fear running through their veins about not getting the product out at the other end. It was as simple as that. Well, it seemed to me to be as simple as that. So it's not what you say it is, it's what they say it is. Okay, so I think that's a fundamental thing that we've got to understand. Customers have too many choices and too little time. Most offerings have similar quality and features, so that's the point of difference, is not actually that compelling anymore. We tend to make our choices based on something else. There are over 50 different washing machines to choose from. How do you choose which one to buy? It gets down to trust. That's the one thing that really is what brands are about. And when I say trust, what I mean is trust equals reliability plus delight. So it comes from a meeting of meeting and beating customer expectations. That's fundamentally what a brand is about. That's why it's not simply product features. It's about reputation. It's about values. It's about your point of view. It's not just doing enough, it's actually doing more. So, so therefore, trust is the key to get into people's minds and find a space, what we call a space within that mind. From my understanding of part of the way that our brains work is that we, as Malcolm Gladwell says, we thin slice, we take little bits of information and we put it into pigeonholes in our heads. And once we've done that, it's incredibly difficult to actually get it out and replace it with other stuff in that same pigeonhole. So what we tell clients to do is to create their own space. There was a lot of fuss about a book that came into publication about 10 years ago called Blue Ocean Strategy. I don't know if you've heard of it, but that was exactly what Blue Ocean Strategy was about. It was about finding clear space in people's heads. And it strikes me that that's one of the objectives that needs to happen with this conversation, is that we need to engage the customer, the consumer, the public, with some very clear communication and establish some clear space in their minds about what we're talking about. And it's not buy West, eat best, which is a sort of a clumsy attempt at what we're talking about here, as in buy local, enjoy local produce. So understanding the customer with a trust lens is, so these are just 5 kind of rules, I guess, that I've come to, and that it seems, when you Google this, this is what everybody's saying. Customer engagement relies on aligned values. Well, that gets back to people are looking at values as a much more important place to meet. And robust personas depend on a truthful relationship. Personas are something that we do in the industry to create a fictitious person that has different psychographic and demographic profiles. It's a housewife with 2 children that has a part-time job that is run off her heels because she's taking the kids to school, that sort of stuff. So it gives you a picture of a person. And that they've become more and more detailed with more and more digital data for customers. What the digital world has done is it's fractured customer segmentation into almost infinitesimal small pieces, because you can get a customer segmentation for each of the different products that you may want to sell. So that's what a persona is. But a persona, to be worthwhile, needs to be based on some kind of truthful relationship, so you actually know the persona that you're creating. One of the great things that when we were working with Little Creatures, when they first started, they used to have their office down in the brewery in Fremantle. So they would walk through their customer base every day. They could see them drinking, eating pizzas or whatever it was. They, almost by osmosis, they understood who their customer was and what their customer was doing. So they had a truthful relationship. They weren't going to a research company and getting these sort of filtered points of view from qualitative and quantitative studies. So whenever you can, first-hand experience is invaluable. Reliable, and that relates back to this third point. Reliable data comes from authentic customer engagements. It's almost the same as the second point, actually. There's lots of data, too much data in actual fact, but there's not a great, there's still, it almost throws up more questions than it answers. We end up, in a lot of cases, we end up chasing our tails. Why did they come off the website that early? Why didn't they go to that page? What if we do this? What if we do that? And you're constantly changing and shifting because you're hypothesizing about who these customers are and how they're engaging with you, rather than having any first-hand knowledge. And I think also the fourth point is that there needs to be, you always have to predict and plan for the future. And some of the best part of that is using intuition as opposed to just hard facts. Andrew was showing those graphs today. They were really compelling, but they're hypothesizing about the future. They're using past models to do that, and they're probably reasonably accurate, but who knows, really? Who thought that Trump was going to be president? And the impacts that has had. No one actually gave him a second chance. So a gut feel is actually something that we are taught pretty early on in our lives to get rid of and not trust. But strangely enough, it's probably the most trustworthy thing. And again, the Little Creatures guys, they used to do a lot of backwards and forwardsing and arguing and wrestling with what that brand was all about and their relationships with their customers. But they also applied a hell of a lot of trust to the way that they felt. They never did any orthodox research on their customers. And then finally, experiencing your customer's path. It's really, really important to live in the shoes of your customer if you can. It's nothing. Again, it's first-hand knowledge. It's there's nothing better than it. One of the things that we always do when we first start working with a client is spending time with them at their place, understanding what they're going through, going to the factories. And something that we have tried to do in the past is actually spend time at their place of work, at their businesses, so as we're just there. We're not necessarily working on their business whilst we're there, but we're just there. It's very, very important to experience in first hand. So I thought just a couple of examples, as this is work that we've done. So customer engagement is aligned values. So this was what British Sausage were when they came to us. They were uniquely Australian, whatever that means. It was quite puzzling. And their problem was that people thought that they were for English people, the sausages, because they had a big Union Jack on their logo. I mean, it's pretty logical. In actual fact, they weren't. The owner was English, but everything else about the sausage, they're made in Bibra Lake. You know, they're made with Australian ingredients. So we literally just put an Australian and an Aussie flag because it was a combination, and we changed the slogan to Australian made the British way, which isn't tricky. It isn't. It's clever insofar as it's actually a statement of fact. So now I understand, and I've got a bit of communication, whereas uniquely Australian just puzzles me, and I've got to somehow figure that out. Oh. Robust personas depends on a truthful relationship. This was work we did for the Southern Forests brand right at the very beginning. We don't work with them anymore, but the brand work that we did on that was about setting up that region as genuine. The people themselves represent the region. So there was a lot of work done face to face with these people. We understood who they were. We had a truthful relationship with them. And then the customer that's the farmer. That's one of the guys that grows the vegetables, or the cauliflower in this case. So again, it's trying to be clear and truthful. Dome we've worked with Dome for some time. We all got different thoughts about Dome, but what they do is engage with their customer incredibly well. It's a safe, a diverse space that people feel unchallenged by. You may have a point of view about their food and coffee, but mothers groups meet there, little kids after school meet there, business people meet there. A group of girls, that girl has just been engaged and she's just showing her engagement ring. They are, when we do these photographs, they're real people within the cafe. They're not models or talent or any of the people that use the system. So they're always checking in with who their customers are. Now they're kind of lucky because they've got their audience is within their product, but they're always checking in and recording on these customer engagements. Intuitively predict and plan for this is the last project we did with Little Creatures. This is now the fastest growing beer in Victoria. It was when Little Creatures set up in the Geelong with their brewery. Intuitively, what I mean here is that it was always going to be a local beer. It was always going to be made with 100% Victorian ingredients, because we intuitively knew that was going to work. Again, there was no research to prove this fact. There were no groups that were done. It was an intent of, we've just bought a new brewery, we're setting up in a local area, we want to make a local beer for the local people that we're now living with. It was an intuitive decision that they knew was going to work because it was based on an alignment of values, being truthful with the local people, and the rest is history. It's one of the most successful beers that Lion have got. And then with Little Creatures, they were constantly monitoring their multi-dimensional touch points, you know, from the relationship they have with their pub owners, the Facebook pages, the Instagram pages, the website, the craft markets that they run on the weekends in their breweries. The world of that brand is multi-dimensional, and the affinity that people certainly used to have with the brand before it was sold was something I've never seen before. The sense of ownership that the customer had, the sense of disappointment, in actual fact, when they sold was the stark sort of reality of it. Wow, that's how much it meant to people. It was in Western Australia. It was quite resonating. It was a sense of disappointment that this great success story has now gone. We've sold it, and it's now part of a big multinational, and it's just going to be in a portfolio, and before you know it, it's going to disappear. So, as I was saying about the way that they used to operate in the brewery, they knew they were in touch with where their customer was. So I guess what I'm saying is that in any relationship, there's a sense of honesty that must be there to earn that trust and respect, and an over-delivery of what it is you're promising. Never an over-promise and an under-delivery, like the politicians we have. They're always over-promising and under-delivering. It's such a basic tenet of communication and relationship building. So you always delight and surprise. That's me. Any questions?
Yeah, we'll do some questions.
Have we got that much time?
Well, you have got a little bit of time. We'll make time for you, Jeff. We'll make time for you. So yeah, we've got some, I think Peter coming around with a roving mic, so maybe if you could just say name and business, and we'll see if we can find some nice difficult questions for Jeff.
Hi Jeff, David Windsor from Bunbury.
Hi.
You spoke about the importance of values. What's your sense of the role of satisfying those value-driven requirements in generating value in food products? Is that something people are going to be willing to pay extra for,
Yeah.
or is that something people are going to expect delivered as a basic hygiene factor?
Well, I think maybe in the future, when it becomes the norm, but it is so not the norm now, that yes, people they're prepared. I mean, British sausages is one example. It's not a cheap sausage. You can buy sausages for half the price in just one row down in the meat section. So what we've tried to communicate with that particular product is the passion of the guy who started it, and the values that he sets, and and communicated his story, and so far so good. But I think values are now so important that yes, they work to deliver a margin.
And so which of the values held by the consumer do you believe that speaks to?
Well, I think people are they certainly, when it comes to food, they want to know where it's from, and they want to know how it was made, and they want to know who it was made by and whether that person is trustworthy. So there's those three fundamentals, they certainly want to know where it's from. That gives them a sense, if it's from Australia, that can't be that bad then. But whereabouts in Australia? Down south. Well, they're okay down there. But who's actually making it? This guy or this lady, and they do this, and this. That's when within the story, you can start to flesh out the lengths of which they go to produce whatever it is they're producing. And by that time, most customers are committed if they've got that far. So it's the integrity with which you go about what you're doing, the corners you're not cutting, so to speak, and some of that is inherent in Australian, if you like, but it's never enough. You can't just leave it at Australian. You've got to actually drill down into what it is you're actually doing and what do you actually stand for, and then you can start to build up from a point of view of what you're charging or where you're putting your product.
Great question at the back.
Yeah, Rod Safstrom. Jeff, when I was listening to your talk, I was trying to translate it into the food security question.
Yeah.
So if we're marketing food security, this dilemma we have that we're discussing today, how might we market that to the community?
It's funny, when Graham came to the office, and we met for about an hour and a half, maybe, And I was baffled. I didn't know what he was talking about. I honestly, and I think for a lot of people, if they came in here, just off the street, so to speak, I don't think they'd get it. It's quite a private conversation at the moment. It's very informed. There's lots of data. There's lots of historical reference points, etc. But there's, I think the government, as in Eat West Buy Best, is a crude example of trying to make something work, but they compromised that very early on in the piece. But it needs to be. It's such a big story, as in, and on one level very simple, like food security. But food security itself, I'm not sure what that means. The language needs to be simplified and be more clear. I think food security to people that work in this industry makes sense, and this is one of the things that happens to industries. We use vernacular and we all used to it, but we forget, that people who are not part of this just, what is that? I'm not sure. Is it fences with barbed wire? Is it guns? Or what is food security? I don't. Unless you've actually spent just maybe half an hour reading about it, you don't actually know what food security is. So, and that was the reason for the example with British sausages. Is Australia made the British way. That was what it was. We weren't being clever. We were just actually trying to state exactly what it was. It's a British sausage made with Australian ingredients. Bang. And you make your mind up if that's what you want. But sausages are a very traditional product. Everyone knows the Poms make decent sausages. Must be okay, So we're potentially going to have issues with creating and growing enough food for Australia, for Perth or for our cities. What are we doing about it? Posing questions perhaps, but being very clear and not simple, but just clear and straightforward, rather than or stepping outside this and looking at it from a consumer's point of view about, okay, what do you? I'm not sure what you mean. How can I help? Because most people would want to help. The only thing I would say that occurs to me, and one of the things that's interesting in this, is that the current consumer trend, or there are one of the largest consumer trends at the moment, is towards premiumisation. So as you start charging more for your product, what happens is that you then open yourself up to other products that are in that category that are at that cost. And that may be imported products, as in the cheese example, Andrew. I might be happy with, Devondale cheddar, but if I'm starting to pay more for that cheddar, then I wonder what English cheddar's like, where it came from, where it was the original stuff, so to speak. And that's happening a lot, that we are, as prices are rising, people get into a different consideration set and start looking further afield. I mean, and beer is another classic example. 30 years ago, it was a simple choice. It was Emu or Swan. Now, people have a repertoire of maybe 12 to 15 beers that they will drink on a semi-regular basis. They'll duck in and out of craft, or they'll go and they might have a VB, or they might have a Steinlager or a Heineken or whatever, but they'll go all over the place. So there's a nice irony here about how do we talk about food security in this local area and wrap that up in quality as well, because it's not good enough for it just to be local. It has to be good to get people's interest, Otherwise, I'm not going to buy something that's substandard just because it's local. So I think that's a very important question within all this as well. I'm assuming that the locally produced stuff is going to be as excellent as anything I can buy. you know, the stone fruit that comes out of the hills is better or as good as the imported stuff from the Napa Valley that I get in the other end of the season, that sort of thing. So there's sort of a complex, there's complex levels of that now that it's all part of this same conversation.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.